Josh.
All right, Matt.
Yep.
Michael McDermott.
Yep.
Casey Florence.
Here.
Thank you. You're all set to start.
All right, thank you. I appreciate everybody showing up tonight, particularly Brian. We're happy to hear an update tonight. I would just open it up. I'm not sure. I see a Peter's iPad if there's any public comment. If anybody wishes to speak to the Fire Building Committee, please indicate by raising your hand or just speaking. Okay, seeing none. I believe we're going to go into site review, and certainly welcome Brian. We'll allow you to take over the screen and just get us up to date where we are with the site selection process.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I think this is kind of like me reporting on what I did on my summer vacation. Because the last time we met, I think it was May or late spring. So I'm going to bring you through what we have done from June into July and into August. Because I don't think you've seen any of this. Last time you authorized me to proceed on some schematic design for the Pleasant Street site. That was the site determined to be the site for the headquarters. And there was no substation being planned at this time. So the headquarters was going to need to accommodate all of the requirements of the department, plus all of the proposed apparatus that was at headquarters or being planned for new headquarters. So we dove into the challenge, and on June 8th, we had developed a floor plan, and it was a 2-story plan for the administrative areas and then high bay areas for apparatus. So this plan was shown to the fire department, and they had offered comments back. I don't know if I need to walk you through this in a lot of detail, because we have incorporated some plan revisions to this. But primarily, it has a vestibule coming into a public lobby, and that public lobby had access to a training classroom, EOC, immediately to the right, had a folding partition, so this room could get divided into a room off the lobby or a smaller room off of a rear corridor. And it has also a vestibule entrance for egress out to the side of the building. That kind of constituted the public area of the building, and off the public lobby, there was access for the public to have access to the watch room for any personnel at the watch room. Direct access into an exam room, so you could use this for medical purposes coming off the public lobby. At other times of the day or night, these doors would be access controlled. If the public were allowed further into the building, they could come into this corridor, but still have restricted access to the remainder of the facility. But what that additional access gained them was access to restroom facilities and direct access to fire prevention. Coming in off the side vestibule, we had the emergency management director, supply storage, fire prevention also had an interview room. So this was kind of designed to be also a semi-public corridor, but not giving public access any further into the workings of the fire department itself. Moving a little bit further back in the plan, it gives you access into the building, into a stair A. This access would be for staff use or anybody coming to the department to see any administration. Because in the core of the plan, we have fire administration offices, executive assistant off of a conference room, assistant fire chief, shift deputy, training EMS office, an internal restroom facility, and training storage. This was all kind of a suite area for administration. Off the corridor was a study room, and also the tour commander, his offices were there. But to the rear of the plan was kind of the fire department's day space or space for being a day room, lounge, dining, and kitchen. All of this looking toward the rear of the site. Now, all of that gave them, cancel that, gave them access from this work area directly into apparatus bays, either coming from the rear of the site into the vestibule and into the apparatus, coming from the day room, dining, kitchen into a turnout gear locker room, so they could get turnout gear and then directly into the bays. There was also access from this upper corridor to come through and have access into the apparatus bay area from that location. You also saw a stair coming from upstairs that brought you down into the turnout gear area or down and into the apparatus bays. The apparatus bays are just what they say. And off of that, we had a mechanics and part storage. Onto the far left, we had medical supplies, cascade room, hose storage, general storage, and decontamination. With all of that having a mezzanine over the top. And also on the right side, there was a mezzanine area over the right side because taking advantage of the high bay for the apparatus. I'm going to get now just to go to the upper floor because there was a two-story area, but it was just for the firefighters' use. It was, because it's for firefighters only, we did not have an elevator to this floor. We had two stairs. We had stair A and stair B. Stair A, as you saw, was off the back entry. It came into a corridor, central corridor, and off of that was roll call, physical training room. And in the center of the plan is property lockers. So all of the firefighters would have a property locker. And from those lockers, you would have access into what I call a quiet corridor. The quiet corridor gives you access to 7 bunk rooms, an officer's bunk room, and then 4 toilet shower rooms that would be used by anybody utilizing the bunk rooms. So the bunk rooms would have desk, chair, mattress, side table, and then they would have access to any of the toilet shower rooms with shower, toilet, sink, urinal. So all of those toilet shower rooms are identical to be utilized by anybody in that quiet corridor. Stair B gives you access down to the apparatus bays and turnout gear. It also gives you access out to the mezzanine storage that was on this side. We had some stair access to the mezzanine to the left side of the upper bay area for the apparatus. So it's a quick summary of where we were on June 8th. When we received comments back from the fire department, they were primarily positive about the overall plan, the overall arrangement of the plan, but they did ask for some additional accommodations. Primarily, we had discussions about whether this facility was to be a 4-bay facility or a 5-bay facility for apparatus bays. And so what we did was we identified all of the apparatus that was being accommodated or being planned for. We laid out the apparatus within the bays. And now we, instead of the last plan showing 4 bays wide, we are now showing 5 bays wide. It does have some area of bays that are not being accommodated with any vehicles. This one primarily was set up this way just because it's a drive-through bay for the tower area. The other request for the fire department was down in the lower left a desire to have some training tower. A training tower would give them ladder access and ladder training. It could be used for hose drying and hose drying of hose. It also has to do with, we could put openings on that tower so they could have an area so they could go in and out of the structure and rappel from the structure and do a lot of training from that structure. So what that did was added this training tower to the lower left. That also gave us a stair access where we could get up to the mezzanine on that side of the bays also. So instead of just a training tower with stairs, those stairs gave us access to the mezzanine. The rest of the plan really was unchanged to the right side, but it was not unchanged on the upper floor. And on the upper floor, the outline that I showed you on the rear of the plan is identical to what I showed you before. But on the plan before, we had this as not being contained space. I think it was wise of the fire department to see that. And actually, we could easily contain this space and just leave it for future expansion. This is about 3,000 square feet on the upper floor that doesn't have program needs, but it could be there for future needs, whether that's future storage or any future build out on that floor. It's now being shown as future space. But the rest of the layout was unchanged, and they were complimentary about the efficiency of the plant and the layout. So now we're up to July 2nd. Seeing that we made these changes to the plan, we now incorporated those plans onto the site. And so what I'm showing you is the site plan on July 6th and where we were looking to place the facility and how we were looking to get on and off of Pleasant Street. We had located this directly across the street from the side street off of Pleasant. And I don't remember the name of this street right offhand. Somebody could probably remind me what this street is named. It starts with a T. But we thought for vehicles, it would be the most efficient to make this a cross intersection here on Pleasant Street. Come onto the site with one lane, organize public parking in the front of the site, organize staff parking to the side of the site. And then we also had a request to incorporate some passive recreation to the rear of the site, having to do with the original transfer of the property. So we had some additional public parking in the rear to give access to a playground or walking trails or some sort of passive recreation to be incorporated onto the site in addition to the fire headquarters. On July 6th, I put this together and there were some parameters of the site that I just wanted to point out. The adjacent property is a commercial property and it has public access to the front. It has to the rear kind of a waste yard for landscape waste. And they're using this area of the property for surplus materials and landscaping materials to assist the front commercial property. To the rear of that are two residential properties. And those two residential properties have their backyards abutting the area of the site on Pleasant Street. It was my hope that the development of the headquarters facility would not be a negative impact on the rear yards of these two residential properties. But I was feeling confident that developing the site to the point of this storage yard would really not have a negative impact on the abutters and developing that site as a fire headquarters. that's kind of where I was with my thought process on July 6th on how we are to best utilize this site. I wasn't concerned about passive recreation to the rear. I felt that that was not a heavy impact on residential abutters, but the fire headquarters would probably be a lit facility at all hours of the night. Bringing additional lighting to that site, I thought would be a negative to the neighbors that I was trying to avoid. But also on July 6th, I was a little concerned about the wetland delineations on this site because I did walk the site and I knew to the right side of the site, I was high and dry. But as I got toward the center of the site, I was concerned with what I visually saw was areas of what I thought were potential wetlands. So having 5 bays wide, trying to make the administrative portion of this building narrow and deep instead of wide. I was trying to make the width of the building as narrow as I could on this site. As far as site circulation for apparatus would return to the facility and would circumnavigate the site, could come back through drive-through bays, or could come back to the front of the building and then back in to the bays. We had 2 lanes exiting the site. And the reason that I was recommending 2 lanes exiting the site, and I'll zoom in on this, is I was concerned with the heavy traffic on Pleasant Street. And if there was ever a function in this community room that had public on this site, I was concerned that the traffic on Pleasant Street may develop queuing on this site for public egress onto Pleasant Street. There would be a delayed egress if there was heavy traffic. So that's why I was proposing a second lane for right turn only. A right turn only lane would free up traffic and make traffic flow better, but it also would give apparatus the ability to get onto Pleasant Street faster in an emergency condition. If there was any queuing that was happening on the egress from Pleasant Street, they could utilize this additional lane to cut traffic, lights and siren, and be able to then travel onto Pleasant Street in an emergency. If there was just a 1 lane exit, I'd be concerned with the queuing potential and also getting apparatus through that queuing and get them out onto Pleasant Street. So that was just, again, that was my thought process when I was applying this to the site on July 6th. I discussed this with the fire department. I recommended a wetland study be done so we could be definitive about where the areas of wetlands were on this site. And I thought it was money well spent because I don't want to be putting a plan together that's not accurate or not actually buildable according to planning and zoning requirements and Conservation Commission. So the town did just what I had requested. They hired Ken Thompson. He's a soil scientist and botanist. So he went to the site and he looked at it for potential for wetlands. And yes, there were wetland soils present. The way that Massachusetts determines wetlands is soils determine wetlands. It's not just a visual, but they have to look at soil composition. They also have to look at plant material, and they also have to look at any wetland species that might be in the area as far as habitat. So they did find areas of wetlands. It was deep, it was mucky, it was areas of peat, and it was primarily in the central portion of the site. But another significant find was the paragraph that I have here, and it talks about a small pool. And that small pool is a potential vernal pool. A vernal pool only means that it's supporting habitat. and it's supporting wildlife habitat. But he says it's a potential vernal pool because he was not there in the spring to observe if any habitat was actually breeding in that area. So he goes on to state that observation should be done during the spring amphibian breeding season to determine the regulatory status of the pool. It is drained to the west by way of a dug ditch, which empties into the central wetland. So I had a further conversation with Mr. Thompson about this. It is a depression, and he believes the depression was man-made. So it's not a natural occurring pool, but even though it's man-made, it does collect water. And if it's supporting amphibian breeding, then it should be protected. Because he couldn't observe anything now, he just points it out as being potential. And he can only confirm that next spring. So that's something that came up in the report, and I'll show you where that happens. The rest of the report just goes on and talks about just general natures of wetlands and what he found. This is a Fema map. The site is at this location. And the Fema map shows areas of 100-year floodplain. And the potential for a 100-year flood potential does come into the center of the property. I had this information, but it's much too general for us to be specific about siting a building. And these Fema maps are not done site specific. They're done by a big flyover of the area, and they're not specific enough in nature, but it did flag an area in the center of the site that has potential for a 100-year flood. The area to the west of the site, as you can see, there's no potential for flooding, and FEMA doesn't designate that area as a flood potential. Even though that area could be wetlands, it doesn't have a flood potential. And then the report goes on to talk about species. I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but the vegetation conclusion has the conclusion in certain areas as if it's all yes, that means that area is wetland. It goes on to talk about other areas of the site where all the answers come up no, meaning it's not a wetland. He went to a third area of the site. Answers came up yes, it's a wetland. And then he went to the fourth area of the site. Answers come up all no, so there's no wetlands. So the site has both. I think the most important piece that we're looking for in all this is this field map. He's developed this field map. He went out and flagged areas of wetlands. So this is the data that was really the most important to me as citing a headquarters. If you go down Pleasant Street, you'll see an area directly off of Pleasant Street that there's been some filling that's happened. That's been man-made filling, but that man-made effort has created an area that's non-wetlands right off of Pleasant Street. The area within the green lines is the area of wetlands. The areas outside the green lines have no designated wetlands. This is that small potential vernal pool. It's extreme west of the site. It has a small area of wetlands that connects the vernal pool to the rest of the main wetlands area. And if it is a vernal pool, they carry a 100-foot buffer protection zone around the vernal pool. So again, it's not definitive. It's potentially a vernal pool. If in the spring it's found not to contribute to habitat, that red circle disappears, as well as the 100-foot buffer disappears. So we were in the right part of the site when we were developing the site plan, but now this gives us additional information. So what we did was then we took the wetland delineation that Ken distributed. We took the headquarters facility that we had proposed, and we put the same configuration of the drive areas, the 3 lanes, aligned directly across from the cross street. I kept the back storage area on the adjacent property as the area that I wanted to limit the development of the site for headquarters and parking. And to make this fit left to right, I'm down to 4 bays, not 5 bays. So I'm back to the originally proposed 4-bay configuration, but I do still have the training tower. As you can see, there's minimal impact to wetlands at this location, but there's a direct impact to the 100-foot buffer. So if this is not a vernal pool, we have minimal impacts to wetlands. And in talking with Mr. Thompson, he feels that all you need to get across this is a culvert. You don't need a bridge. You just install a culvert at this location to maintain water flow underneath the road here. But there's minimal impacts to any wetlands at that location. And because this area of the site's already been filled, he feels that filling this area for roadway, as long as we have a culvert through here, should meet requirements of the Conservation Commission. We can impact wetlands as long as we replicate or duplicate wetlands in other areas of the site. So there may have to be, if we take wetlands, we might have to restore wetlands. But here's where we were on August 20th after getting the report. I sent this to Mr. Thompson. He also offered his opinion on this. And his opinion was kind of just what I stated. If it's not a vernal pool, you develop the site and you're good. But he also suggested, could we develop the site without impacting the 100-foot buffer, just in the case that it may have to be maintained? So that brings us up to August 31st. Same building. We have not pushed the building any further deeper into the site. That line of development is not impacting the residential backyards. It's only abutting this storage area. But the roadway network has now shifted. The roadway network is no longer directly across from the cross street. It has 3 lanes. It may have to do additional culverts. We're taking more wetland area, but we are maintaining a 100-foot buffer around a potential vernal pool. The parking is reduced in the front of the building, and access on and off is a little bit different as we're bringing cars onto the site, traveling through the site, and then public would be exiting the site and then connecting back into what's an apparatus area for apparatus egress. The other thing to note about all of this development is you're looking at this as a site plan, and it looks like the site is completely flat. In the area that we're proposing the fire headquarters, the site does slope. It slopes down to wetlands. So the low part of the site is wetlands. The high part of the site is where it abuts the abutter to the west. So in order to make this an area that we need to flatten to develop the site, there's potential that we're going to be cutting and having retaining walls on the high side, and we may also have to be putting retaining walls, and then raising the site on the low side. All of this can be engineered. All of this is really not an impediment to development. It just may impact cost of development on this site. I don't see anything here that's a major red flag. I kind of prefer this plan myself because of what it happens at the roadway, what it happens at Pleasant Street, what it happens with the cross connection. It gives you more public parking, but my hands are tied until we find out more about this potential vernal pool, and I can't answer that until spring. So unfortunately, that's an impediment to going forward with a clear answer, although we have an answer if we have to respect the buffer. So the other thing I want to point out is building area. The space needs assessment was $23,490 for the building. We're at $23,132. So we are actually about 1,200 square feet smaller than the space needs assessment anticipated. But we also have 3,000 square feet of future. And that was the second floor space that was for future build out. But the program space, we did quite well with a pretty efficient design on this site. And we're able to get the parking. We have 18 spaces for fire visitors, 4 handicapped, and we also have 14 spaces for staff spaces along the side. And we also had public parking, to the rear. That was the public parking that we had the front and the rear, just to gain access to what could be passive recreation in the back. So that's what I did on my summer vacation. I open it up to comments.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate all the work you've put into this project. I'm probably going to defer to the fire chief and fire staff first for their comments on it.
Matt, can you hear us?
Yep.
Hi, this is Jimmy Reedy. I'm just to put me in the agenda with Deputy Slatz and Chief McDermott. I came off a call, sorry, just to add us to that. So we got a couple questions right off the get-go here. We're trying obviously with the vernal pool and waiting till the spring. What's the is there something that they can monitor even before the spring that kind of gives us a heads up there, Brian? Or
well, I can't speak for Ken, but he really needs to see if there are little tadpoles and frogs hopping out of there in the springtime. He can't determine that now because they've all left their breeding ground.
Okay.
And they breed and then they leave. So the only way he can really determine this is go during the breeding season. And it's frogs and tadpoles that he's looking for. I personally hope he never finds them.
Okay, thank you for answering my question. And then the other question I have is just, obviously we're kind of getting to the, meat and potatoes of everything. I know we have a few members here on the department that would probably like some input, but obviously if we're going to be not changing building design or location stuff, that's going to be kind of a moot point. How much of this is absolute, not movable, not changeable, or anything like that?
As far as I'm concerned, everything is movable and everything is changeable. We're here to satisfy your program. So if we have to go back to the drawing board on any of this, we go back to the drawing board.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just pointed out where I saw some design parameters that we were trying to just understand and design within. But it's all a variable here. There's a lot of variables. If there's anything that doesn't satisfy you as a community or as a fire department, we are fully prepared to go back to the drawing board.
Can you recreate the pool in a different location on the lot?
That's a question for Mr. Thompson.
So Brian, if I could, I have a couple questions actually, but one, you know, what does it do to the design? And I may be off base, but what does it do to this? Can you squeeze in a fifth bay by shifting the bays, basically, shifting those up and maybe flush with the back of the building? Does that make any sense? Can you squeeze out the fifth bay if you do that, and would it make sense programmatically?
The concern I have is how close we are already to wetlands. We're showing this development almost right on the wetland line, which means there's no grading rights there. There's nothing to, we have to do some filling in that area probably. We can't grade into the wetlands, so we have to probably build a wall. I mean, it can be done. I think the fifth bay is problematic, to be honest with you. I think we can gain space by making maybe deeper bays instead of wider. So if we look at Apparatus, each one of these bays is designed for, you know, double deep. Let me go back to the plan.
Double deep plus, if I'm not mistaken, Brian.
Double deep plus. Some of these have 3 apparatus within them, 3 deep. And some of these are trailers in the middle, and Apparatus would maybe leave front and rear. We left one open for a drive-through configuration, but you see some of these are 3 deep. If we go down to 4 bays, it looks as though everything that's identified here at 4 bays won't all fit. Some of this are vehicles that may be able to go outside.
That was the other question, Brian, on something like that. If that other bay doesn't fit and it's understandable, would it be advantageous to build a carport in the back where some of that stuff could be stored?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have to be, it would be a less expensive product?
Yeah.
Is that something that might be feasible rather than tying up for that amount of time?
I think it's not only feasible, Chief, but it also would provide a dark buffer to the neighbors. We've used carports and enclosed the back of them. And so when the neighbor looks out at night, they're just seeing the backside of a dark building, and they're blocking the light and light pollution by putting an auxiliary structure back there. That would fit. That would fit. And
I only shoot, Chief, if you don't mind.
Oh, by all means, sir.
You know, I hear what you're saying, but I just feel like when we start talking about carports, it's like it's a half-ass attempt to do what we need, and that's to meet our basic fundamental need for the fire department. If we're already building auxiliary buildings, we've got a problem from the get-go, in my opinion. I also think it should have all the utilities that you need to keep a vehicle, you know, like heat and the other things that you would do, you know, shelter from the elements and whatnot. I want to say that in my mind, we either have to accept the proposal with a potential vernal pool and move ahead with the hopes that in the spring that's excluded, or look at redesigning this site or decide that this site's just not going to work. And so, Brian, when I look at this facility, I wonder if there's a way to move staffing away from the right side of the building and shift the entire building closer to the property line so that we just have an access point around the building on that side.
So three sides, Matt, instead of 4?
Yeah, and shift the playground passive recreation area more to the left and add more parking in the rear of the building, particular to the left of the generator, that we wouldn't be able to squeeze out the 5th bay and sort of move parking. And I'm even thinking, like, in my head outside of the box where potentially there's no public parking in the front of the building, and that anyone that comes onto the property is scooted around to the back and actually flip the whole floor print so that the entry point is in the back. And I know that's like out of the box, it maybe doesn't make sense, but I'm just trying to figure out a way to bring that building closer to the street, closer to the property line, where the whole left side of the property, we have more flexibility on the wetland side. That's where our public parking is, or employee parking. I just hate to kind of walk away from the site, but I also hate to build something that just doesn't make sense right out of the gate. So I think about, you know, these fire departments busy, and they have multiple groups toned in. You know, where are they parking? Do we want to build in a location where they can't even get on the site and have enough available space? These are just thoughts. I'm not saying I'm right, wrong, but just things that I'm thinking about.
I can understand what you're saying about the carport, Matt, but I was thinking more about an enclosed storage garage. Some of these things in the apparatus bays are just trailers. So if they had a garage bay that they could still shelter trailers, open, hook a trailer and go, it gives them the same level of protection as if it was in the bay. And it could be a buffer to the rest of the facility, rest of the site. I know pushing everything back to the north is a real tempting thing to do. I just bring up the concern about these backyards too. I just know how much of an impact you're going to make. I did leave an area between the property line and the pavement because we probably will be grading some of this also between the drive areas and the property lines. There may still be a little retaining wall along there too, though, but you know, we may clear right to the property line, but we're going to have to grade that too. I'm just bringing up potentials.
Yeah.
But I think Matt had, that's an interesting idea, that just shifting, you know, taking away the parking and replicating the parking maybe in the upper left corner somewhere, and then push the whole facility over to the right. Mm-hmm. You know, that might get you the fifth bay. And I think that's really I mean, I certainly don't disagree. I think, you know, if we struggle with this and the site just doesn't, where it's close, but it doesn't quite work, then, you know, we're probably better off, you know, trying something else. But I think, I do think there's enough kind of to work with here to squeeze it in.
How would that operationally look for like the tower coming into this parking lot and trying to get through those public spaces and around the building? Or with
even as it is, it would be very difficult.
You'd have to back it in.
Even as that sets up, that would be very difficult swings.
This one has a better turning radius. This one's easy. This one has what you need to bring the vehicles around. It has all the turning radiuses, and you can line it up with the bay and be out the front.
Mm-hmm.
So Chief, just from an operational standpoint, how many of the vehicles do you anticipate being drive-through? You know, obviously the tower.
2 engines, the ambulances can back in. Again, it's common knowledge, even trucking companies, UPS, FedEx, they don't like their vehicles backing up. If they get in accidents, they literally fire their people. This is, the more you're doing to accommodate to drive through, the safer it is for everyone.
Yeah.
How many bays? I'd say at least 2. At least 2 would have the option. Or again, when I say the option, you might have 1 truck loaded so it's going out the back door, 1 truck loaded so it's going out the front. But when they're both gone, it's a drive-through at that point. And then the other truck backs in. But it's not that constant rotation of vehicles. Like in here, every time they pull out, they're backing in here.
Yeah.
Brian, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Obviously, you've gone over a lot of plan reviews. In the spectrum of like I don't know if you grade it from 1 to 10 or, you know, best to worst. I mean, your professional opinion on this, is this like kind of setting us up for disaster, or what do you think?
Oh, I think there's a lot of positives on this site. I mean, yes, I had to know exactly where the wetland line was, but I don't see enough here that throws this site out of potential other than this vernal pool. It couldn't have been in a worse location for what we were hoping to see. If I took that vernal pool off this map, I think we'd have a plan everybody would feel comfortable with, and I think we can accommodate the apparatus in some form or fashion. The vernal pool is the big unknown here, and it's the elephant in the room.
Again, I come back to that replication of it. A vernal pool, as you said, is a seasonal thing at best. So if that be the case, if that was moved over the amount of space we were talking about, is that a difficult thing to do? I can tell by the look on your face with the half smile, half, are you out of your mind? Look.
It's not something I can answer, although I was told that this one looks like it was man-made. So when some filling was done in the past and maybe some excavation was done in the past, maybe it's runoff, stormwater runoff from the commercial property next door that's contributing to this wet area. It was man-made to begin with, but once it starts to promote habitat, then it needs to get protected. I don't have the answer. It's a good question, but I can't say with confidence that it can be moved.
No, thank you. I have heard of that being done, and I just figured I would ask.
Brian, would you suggest us having a conversation with Ken or other specialists that could help us understand what can and can't be done? You know, I don't want to pin it on you if this is not your area of expertise, but, you know, maybe speaking with somebody that specializes in this, we might have more information where maybe the buffer zone could be reduced, or I just don't have enough knowledge. So
yeah, Matt, you do have a committee in town, Conservation Commission, that also probably has history with this. So ultimately it has to get through your local approvals. And if it's awarded approval by Conservation Commission, there has to be certain mitigating factors that we take care of. And I don't know if the Conservation Commission has a history of allowing vernal pools to be duplicated on site. But I think that's something that you may have to address or want to address locally first, and also involve Ken on that conversation. But the Conservation Commission, your local commission, would be the one approving this.
Okay, Michael, could you help us to understand, you know, do we have enough information here to take this to that next step with conservation, at least a cursory judgment or review of the proposed plan, and whether or not we could replicate that to the left of the driveway somehow, or whether they'd grant us any type of waiver or anything like that, understanding that process?
I definitely think we have enough to at least begin that conversation, and probably with staff, with Steve Solbo and Azu at this point, just to give us, you know, as Brian said, give us, you know, some idea about the local, you know, what the local Conservation Commission is going to be concerned with. You know, we have the wetland delineation. Obviously, we've got Brian's sort of site plan here. And I think that's enough to start a conversation, get some direction, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, all of the changes that Brian has made from the original plan, I love the future build out of the second floor space that was a roof in the original plan. My only comment, Brian, would be potentially looking at that that sort of quiet hallway is bedroom number 7, is breaking through that hallway into that unfinished space, maybe adding a few more rooms. Now, I only see one hallway that would access that future space, and just wonder if it would present problems down the road if we just carry 2 hallways into it. So if you blow up, so bunk 7,
the corridor could come through.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if it makes sense to do that now in the original plan, so that we have 2 egresses in that space built into the plan, versus having to worry about doing something with that down the road. Just a thought. And certainly on the first floor, I think doors after the 2 bathrooms would also make sense. I know that you can lock down the area for the fire prevention office, but maybe having doors there, I feel like it would make the building safer for when that training room is being used by the community. But
they would only have access if there were doors here. It would just prevent them from walking this area of the corridor, but all these other doors would be locked.
Okay, it's just a thought. I know how things happen, and you have the access window to fire prevention and getting into that space.
Right.
Just a comment, but I think that this is the optimal plan for the department. I think that probably we should stay with this, bring it to conservation and see what they say. And then maybe potentially, Brian, I don't know, maybe look at, some other, maybe one more second layout of the actual site with the parking and the way they have the station with the 4 bays. If it looks like conservation is not going to give us any leeway with that vernal pool, you know how things roll. We'll find out in the spring that is a problem. And for me, it's the timeline. As a community, the window of opportunity for us to get this in front of the town for a vote is now. I don't want to push this out to the spring to find out that that's a factor and that the fire service is unhappy with the proposed alternate plan, and we're back to square one. And because by the time we get our act together and get another location and a site plan, I think the window of opportunity might have closed on us. And so that's my concern. But at the same respect, not putting them in a facility because it's new, but one that doesn't work for them right out of the gate.
Well, the cost of the building, wherever you put the headquarters, the cost of the building would be the cost of the building.
Yeah.
Now, the variable here is what's the cost of site development? And if the cost of site development becomes very high, would it make sense then to buy a piece of property, take that money, buy a piece of property, and reduce your site development costs? The building is still going to be the building. And I know that this Pleasant Street site checked off a lot of boxes as far as location, adjacent to a major artery on the west side of town. I don't know if there are any other properties even for sale that are going to check off the same number of boxes for what we have here.
To your point, that is my fear, that we would be back at square one. I mean, we did put an RFP and got no responses to that. And, obviously the market for real estate and what we're able to pay, certainly in the private sector, can probably get a lot more for it on the open market. So chances of finding property is probably extremely slim, my guess.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
We extended the bay. If we extended the bays front and back of the building, could we increase the parking in the back, increase the radiuses in the back, and buy the same space with 4 bays, just longer, a larger footprint of the garage space?
I'd be happy to do that exercise, Chief, and show you. It does limit, in some regards, your drive-through capabilities, because now your drive-through just gets to be a longer drive-through. It's not giving you any benefit there other than.
I I do agree with Matt. Obviously, the 5th bay is what we need because we're not just building it for the next 10 years. We're building it similar to this station for the next 30 or 40 years. So we are going to need that space and just trying to accommodate it into this footprint if we need to, because I don't feel that the property is out there for us to purchase for something like this. Not that we could afford.
Does the 5th bay, is the 5th bay needed now, or is the 5th bay potentially your downtown substation bay? Because we also had that in the conversation about future expansion, maybe central business district.
And again, everything you're saying is true. The difficulty with what we're talking about is the fire station is the initial cost when you build 3 stations, it's personnel. Mm-hmm. And once you add the personnel into it, one of the purposes for doing this is to be able to, over the course of time, as the town grows, grow with the community. And then as that, we could use it now, but we don't have the personnel to staff it. And it would not happen because of it. So one of the purposes of doing this was to allow for the expansion, still living in the same 2 spots. And then the need draws in another station if that is what is required.
Yeah, that makes sense. So really, Chief, you're saying that the 5th bay is sort of critical to this plan, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Brian, and I don't know about you, but once this is built, this is done. And again, I'm being honest. That's my personality. It's straightforward. Mike doesn't like it sometimes. He'll slap me. He'll yell at me after this. But at the same time, we're trying to look at it for the most practical purpose. And I think you said it to me in one of the earlier meetings. If we're spending and investing that money now, it's going to be cheaper than what it would be to build that other bay in 10 years.
No question. You're still going to be scared with the price tag on this, but it's still going to be cheaper than 10, 15, 20 years from now.
You just so you're aware, I'm really cheap. I'm really cheap. You can ask the guy that's just below me in the Brady Bunch picture here. Ask Casey Florence. He'll tell you I'm really cheap.
Well, I can't speak to that, but Chief, since you just brought up that once this building is built, it's built, and I do agree with you. A couple of the points that I wrote down here, it's already been talked about. The parking situation, I believe I counted 14 spots for personnel on duty. I mean, Monday through Friday, I have a count of 13. And that doesn't include shift change when people are coming and going. So that's going to be tight. Something else I noticed, gear lockers. I think there was about 36, 38 of them. Mm-hmm. And, we're looking at probably a minimum of 50 right now, just to staff the guys that we have. And we do want to build this building for 20, 30, 40 years out. The bunks, they're pretty much full. But I think if you combine the bunks and the gear locker with that extra 3,000 square feet, once the building is built, it's built. Why don't we utilize that space now and accommodate those gear lockers?
Casey, that was one of the reasons for putting in that roof and carrying it out in conversation, was that at that point, when I say the building is built, I'm talking the outside footprint of the building. You are definitely right about the parking. We would definitely have to find accommodations for that. But as far as the footprint of the building, that roof extending to the front buys us that extra space. Now
I think it's totally necessary. One other question I had, with the design with the vernal pool in there, is there any way to do a U-turn in front of the bays to back a truck in? And I know you guys have been talking about you want to do the drive-through. It's safer. I get that. But the design with this vernal pool that we're looking at, well, actually, no, this isn't the one with the vernal pool. I don't see how you're going to get apparatus, around the building. It just seems so tight.
Yeah, that's this plan.
So do you think in front of those bays, that's large enough? It's tough when you're looking on an iPhone.
Yeah, you could,
to scale.
You could do U-turns in here.
Okay. All right.
I look where we're backing in here, Casey. I look where we're backing in on School Street, and this is probably as tight as you're going to get.
As tight as you're going to get?
No, I'm saying I'm looking at this. I think that's far tighter than looking at these 4 full bays.
Okay.
And plus, we're not going to be backing into cubby holes. We're going to be backing into
Yep.
real vehicle
Yeah,
garage
I really
doors.
did. I couldn't tell with scale of everything that I'm looking at. And the last thing, I know this sounds like a luxury. I just couldn't get a good look at what the kitchen looks like. And again, I know it sounds like a luxury, but a couple times a year when we get these big storms and we are cooking for everybody, police, fire, highway department, is that kitchen, I guess, suited to be handling the large amount of people.
In area, it's a large area, and we'd have to get into the details of all the appliances and storage cabinets. And we have turnout gear lockers up to 50 on this plan.
Okay, was there that many?
Yeah.
Okay.
The earlier plan had fewer, but we increased the turnout gear lockers to 50 on this plan.
Okay, I do think that would have to be the bare minimum. We're just at that awkward stage of a town size where we don't run two stations independently. There's a lot of bouncing back and forth. So, the way we run right now, you got to have a home base where everyone keeps their stuff and that you're reporting to one spot every morning or on tones. So I would just hate to see us move into a building that we're already maxed out on space.
Correct. I would agree.
Chief, could I ask you, I know little that I know that, preferred pull-through bays makes sense. And we just talked about backing up, but if we took the administrative wing and actually put it behind the bays, so they were back-end bays, and widened the bays to maybe 6, is that something, again, thinking out of the box, that you're giving up the drive-through, but I think it could be better situated on the site? Is that something that you would entertain even looking at, or is that a no-go?
Again, I'm just looking at national standard. I'm looking at what is out there. It's one of those things. It's what you get used to. It's kind of like living here. People come here and they'll do a design looking at what we live in now, and they don't understand how we can accomplish what we accomplish. But you get used to it over time. As Casey said, if we're moving into something that we're already just fitting into, that's where the problem would be. And if we're going to build something, we should build to improve it, not to basically go back to what we have.
Yep, totally. Okay, next option. On the admin side, thoughts on 3 levels.
Does that require an elevator at that point? Handicap accessible?
I don't know. I just throwing it out there as an idea. Probably a bad one.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to like the efficiency and the way it's going to function on 3 floors versus 2. And I don't think it's an option to go basement either. Basement, main, and upper.
Okay.
I'm still looking at what we have in the apparatus bays. We have 4 areas of light towers. We have a trailer generator. I mean, these are things I agree you want to have inside, and you want to have conditioned, and you want to have for recharge. But maybe they don't take all of this prime apparatus space and go to another storage structure on the site.
Brian, one of the reasons for looking at it in this way and putting all of this equipment inside is right now they're kept in Station 2 in basically a glorified tent that has basically a 20-year lifespan on them. Could it last 30? By all means. But the likelihood, if something happens or it gets ripped, once it's ripped or torn, it's done. That was one of the reasons for accommodating all of this equipment inside.
Yep, and could we accommodate it in an auxiliary structure? I'm saying a structure. Putting a structure with garage doors across the front. So if I have 5 or 6 garage doors across the front, deep enough for these trailers and light towers, then you could just open a bay, grab it, and go. Open the next bay, grab it, and go. And then you're 1 deep in that utility structure. And you're not having to work around whether this goes out the back or out the front. These things don't move a lot. They're going to be planted into the middle of your apparatus bay and not move.
Is that something we can put a little thought into as far as looking at it?
Yes. Yeah.
So you essentially you're talking about sort of a garage structure that you could plant that equipment in. It may or may not need heat, but it would definitely need electric, presumably plumbing of some sort. But you may not have to heat it to the same.
Well, it would need heat. It wouldn't need cooling. But you could put a heated slab into it, and you could put an environmental enclosure, insulated overhead doors, lighting.
Are we talking like a Morton building, or are we talking back to what we were talking initially?
No, I'm thinking we're talking more substantial than just a metal building, Chief. This would have the same siding as your building and your exterior wall on this building. It would be the same exterior wall that you have on your apparatus bay.
I think if you're going to do an auxiliary building, it needs to complement the structure that you're building. I just think it needs,
right.
That's in relative terms over 40, 50-year life expectancy, that's short money.
Still giving you the protection and giving you an ability to grab and go. Maybe even a little bit more convenient to a deeper bay.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking. It's more, especially for the light towers, it gives you easy access, back up, hitch, pull it out. In this scenario, you've got to move a bunch of other equipment in order to get at the light towers, right? So
definitely be willing to look at. I'd definitely be willing to look at any changes. Obviously, the fifth bay is the premium setup. It's one building. It's one thought. It's one electrical system. It's not maintenance. It's not anything having to do with another whole section. This, similar to what we have at Station 2 with the outside building. It's one of those buildings when you don't see it, you don't notice all the things that are going on. But I would definitely be willing to look at some type of thought process for it. Where would you put that on the property, Brian?
I'd put it to the north.
So it's going to go back towards where the playground is?
Yes. Yeah, it could be back in this area. Right across here, a bunch of single deep bays that open right up onto your rear apron area. You can even put the generator into it.
Is there a fire department related reason that the playground is there, or was that just because
it's for me, Mike? It keeps me calm.
Well, that's kind of what I was figuring. Are you the one that broke the equipment at Marathon Park?
That wasn't me.
Michael, I think this was to appease the deed restriction.
Okay. Because honestly, I don't think you need that to appease the deed restriction. I think if, just a trail through the remaining property, I think would solve that. And I kind of Brian's concern about backing up to the quiet neighbor's yard there. I don't know if they're quiet, but if you have a playground with a bunch of kids, I don't know that that's a good mix. A lot of fire department, traffic coming in and out, and then putting a playground there with kids might make me a little nervous.
Trail with some benches on it, Michael, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
Yeah, that was just to satisfy the deed restriction. The only reason I put playground, I think it was suggested that that's another passive recreation use, and it wouldn't be used at night. So when the neighbors probably want it dark and quiet, there wouldn't be people on a playground. So yeah, but if I can take it off the plan, I'd be more than happy to.
For now, that would be my suggestion. I'd obviously defer to members.
I would be fine with it. If it's not necessary, by all means.
Brian, would it make sense if we move the playground and as we come in off of Pleasant Street, that right lane, take more of an angle around the buffer zone and eliminate those 4 front spaces to make a smoother turning radius for like the tower? And then out back where that public parking is adjacent to the playground, extend that out a little bit more to make up for the loss of parking out front. In other words, the engine wouldn't have to cut through the middle of a parking lot. It would kind of have its own dedicated lane,
right?
With an easy
to the other design.
Yeah, I do think there's improvements we can make on this plan, Matt. It was kind of a quick attempt to say, what if we have to respect a 100-foot buffer? And if that continues to be the case, I think that's another thing you need to talk with conservation about, because we're taking actually more of the wetlands here at this entry point than if we didn't have to respect the buffer. You look at the amount of wetlands that's taken here, we're indicating, multiple culverts probably under this roadway versus, there's just a little bit of wetland impact here, although it does impact the buffer. We're maintaining all of this wetlands intact. So yeah, there's pluses and minuses. I think that this may give you enough to talk, at least initiate a discussion locally about good, better, best. And then with that information, we'll do the best we can with these plans.
Matt, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to kind of draft up something with Brian to see what you want to reduce that park size down to? And then it would probably give Brian a better idea how far back he can push this. And then kind of, if we can keep the same template or the bigger driveway template, but push it back, and then you guys have a better idea on the park. I mean, that's, that saves us from structurally kind of, removing, adding, you know what I mean? Like kind of.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're on the same page as me. I guess I'd have a couple of questions. If the existing plan, if we could throw in the storage facility where we've talked about, remove the playground. I think if we remove the playground, we'd be remiss not to add some more public parking to that rear lot, to the point that was made by Casey to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we have that, myself, Michael, however we have to facilitate it, our next conversation should be with the Conservation Commission. I would only ask the chief, if you had an out facility for the lights, we were at 4 bays, added some parking, and either had a lane for the tower truck or back to our original plan, which puts us in the buffer zone. Would you be okay and happy with the plan the way it is moving forward? As long as we got permission, would you be happy with this plan?
With the plan I'm looking at right now?
So this plan with the playground gone, with the outbuilding and additional parking in the rear, and removing the 4 spaces out front and giving you a specific travel lane for the engine and equipment to get around the back side of the building.
The spaces out front are 10, if I'm looking at them, and we lose 4 of those?
Just lose the 4, but we would probably add 8 to the rear.
Definitely.
And this is the worst case scenario, right? The best case is we get some leeway with conservation. We go back to the original plan that has 1 culvert and puts us in the buffer zone that has original entry as designed, which is what you're looking at here. Again, with another outbuilding, same thing as discussed.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. Guys, I know it was mentioned about the housing on that street, that we don't want to go up too far behind them. But if you get rid of that playground and it looks like the property widens, and if you did, I don't want to be insensitive to those people that live there, but if you did push the whole thing back, to me, it looks like you could fit a 5th bay in there, no problem. And I'm just looking from where I live on Park Ave. I have a train stop and a dormitory in my backyard. I would imagine that the train makes way more noise than we'd ever be making. And the train isn't a bother at all. I can't imagine that we'd be disrupting that neighborhood that much.
The difficulty is you're doing this with already houses that are built. You
Yep.
purchased that knowing what you were moving into.
Yep.
These people already have a certain atmosphere that they deal with, and I would be if somebody put that in my backyard. As I'm sure most people would be upset, especially the way it sets up. If people are pulling in, as you said, recall, if we're pulling in and backing vehicles in, I could see that being a bone of contention with those neighbors. Maybe not to the construction in the lumber area for the wood and then the front. Those were only day operations, but that back,
Yeah.
and we move day and night, especially if we put a garage in back there and we're pulling a light tower or generators out in the storm. Thinking what the neighbors are, I see case just what we're dealing with the neighbors down here. I watched a lady hack branches off the pine trees between Station 2 and the duplexes that are built, or the houses that are built off of drawing a blank.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, that we were there before Pratt Town Lane. I don't know. I think you care more about people, Chief. You know.
It's not a choice, Case. It comes with the bugles. You'll see, Case. I told you before. You'll see.
So let me just sort of, for Brian's benefit, sort of frame the question. So I think Matt laid out, the possible option of a 4-bay with a I'll call it an outbuilding, but it's probably not the right term. And some reconfiguration to the turn lanes to accommodate the equipment. So should we also ask Brian to try to figure out if there is a way to add the 5th bay onto a design that otherwise works?
Well, I would say I would agree with Casey that I think if we pushed back and sort of pitched off so that the garage bays are more of an angle towards this commercial site, that you could possibly get the right angle that mirrors sort of that wetlands line to get the 5th bay in there. Ideally, that's what I'd like to see, again, building for the future, but I mean, who knows what the future holds? The future might hold a 3rd station. I don't know.
Maybe dress it up with some arborvitaes like they have down at the softball fields with all those homes. They built the fields right behind them.
I mean, we're doing that now with the elementary school, putting in, 15 footers right out the gate. But, I guess to Brian's point is, we don't want to be $2 million into site work.
Yeah.
Trying to get a 5th bay where this might ideally work. I don't know. I'm at a loss, so I'll leave it to you guys.
What I'm looking at, honestly, I think we're also in a window, Matt, and you brought it up earlier. We're in an opportunity window that we also have to be cognizant of. And the further we push it out to check on a vernal pool, that pushes us into a deeper hole on the other end. No pun intended.
Yeah, and I think that Brian could make some of these changes that we've talked about with outbuilding and, removing the playground, adding some additional parking and accommodating that turning lane. And we can get right in front of conservation and at least get, at least a sense of where they would be headed with it. If there's some strong indication that we can go in this buffer zone or recreate it or do anything creative with the Conservation Commission, then we can still finalize this plan and get something done.
So I will definitely this week I'll make sure that I run some of these ideas through as I say through our environmental planner and DPW director, and that I think they'll be able to give us some much clearer guidance. Because Brian's right, it's local. It's local decisions on these. The Conservation Commission is the local, sort of our local permitting authority, and that's what we have to go through for these. So we'll get clear direction there. So if I do that and I get some answer within the next week or so, maybe we should regroup quicker rather than let too much time go by, and then give Brian some clarity, and then actually once we have a plan, we can share that in a meeting setting with the Conservation Commission. Does that sound like it makes sense?
I think that's exactly what I was looking to get out of this meeting. So I think it's been good comments and helpful, constructive.
So Brian, just if I could, Matt, I just curious what the timeline would be. You know, as you've heard from Matt and the chief, I think we do want to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. So what kind of timeline would you be looking at?
The only thing you haven't seen on a schematic design level are building elevations. We didn't want to start drawing elevations if it wasn't the right solution in plan or in site plan. So if you like the configuration, we can start developing exterior elevations, and all of that information would then go to a professional cost estimator to get you the real dollars. They break it down into building costs and site development costs. And that's really could be the most important piece of everything, is how much. We would put that cost estimate into a total project worksheet with soft costs and contingencies to give you a total project budget. I think to get elevations and a professional cost estimate, figure another 4 to 6 weeks. It's not something that's going to take terribly long, but we'd need your approval to get to that next phase. I can get you by Labor Day weekend some modifications that we just talked about today to show you a potential storage and revise the entry drives, everything that Matt just talked about. I can get you that by this weekend.
That would be great.
So Michael,
yep.
Sorry. So as you know, I want this wrapped up by the end of the year with some type of cost estimation to the town, so we can start doing some public presentations on the proposed plan and all the work that we've been through. And I'd like to be right on the heels of, you know, finalizing the financing for the elementary school so that we can show, you know, what we've saved in that project is like a minimal impact and building a new fire station. And I am sitting here listening to the conversation saying to myself, you know, in the end, I'm comparing this facility to what they're currently working out of, which is a horror show. So, you know, even in the worst case scenario, even in most of the not ideal conditions of the site or the size of the facility, it gets them out of where they're at now, which is just a nightmare. So whatever we need to do, I'm not sure if we need to wait till Labor Day weekend, get those proposals, get back to conservation, or whether we could take a vote tonight to move to the next step. I just need to know that we have the financial ability to do that, to get all the next step done, schematics.
I think from my perspective, we're ready to finalize the schematics and do the cost estimate and all that. I do think, you know, probably would benefit, you know, the project if I could take, you know, this week and just sort of take what Brian's done here and just go over it with Azu and Steve and just make sure that, you know, I'm clear about what the local Conservation Commission is going to require. And I think once we have that, I'm ready to go. So I, you know, maybe if we regroup, you know, Brian can get his work done, I'll get my work done, and we'll regroup right after Labor Day. Does that make sense? And that after that, you know, we can do a vote and we'll be off and running.
And let me work with the fire department to satisfy their storage needs for whether it's bays or storage building.
All right, no, I'm good with that. I mean, a 2-week window to turn all that around is probably high expectations. But yeah, no, it sounds good to me.
Same.
All right, so should we actually, you know, maybe I'm going out on a limb. Should we schedule the next meeting and just keep ourselves to a timeline?
Sounds good.
2 weeks, the 14th of September, that should give me enough time for what I need.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Same.
All right, 2 weeks. Yep. Perfect. All right, so Josh can send out a meeting notice the 14th at 5:30. That work?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
So Michael, I see on here building program. Is that sort of what we went through along with site review? Is that?
Yeah. Let me just go back and look. Yes, is the answer. Okay. Yeah, that's everything I anticipated with this meeting. So I think we've made progress, fleshed out a lot of the issues.
All right, and projected timeline is on the agenda, but I assume it's probably a little bit early, maybe in a couple of weeks. We have an idea what conservation is going to do to us. Right,
and I think projected timeline. I just wanted to see, you know, mostly from Brian where he is in terms of getting, you know, schematics and cost estimates back to us, and so that sounds like a 4 to 6 weeks, which puts us right on schedule.
Chief, I just want to circle back. I don't want to feel like I'm putting pressure on you. So I just want to know from you that you're comfortable with this plan and the things that we talked about tonight, that you're comfortable if this continues to move along, that this would be a place that would be suitable for the department.
Matt, I think you emphasized it earlier. What we are in now is at best acceptable. And at worst, as it gets worse, we that's part of the problem. It's kind of like having a gun put to your head. Do you want to go this way or do you want to go that way? We want to go forward. We want to get the best product we can get and give the best product to the town that we can afford. And also at the same time, planning for what's coming in the future. So by that, yes, I am all in. Let's get it done.
All right, awesome. I guess I would just ask any other comments from anybody else. If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn and see you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I guess second. Josh?
Matt?
Yes.
Michael McDermott?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion was approved. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Hey, thanks everybody.